exonerate my clients by saying, don't worry, it wasn't you. It's like a candle, and you know, you have a flame, you blow out the flame. The candle is the soul, but the flame is a different past life. It's a completely different flame. So your past lives you don't have the responsibility for, but their emotional trauma is what you're carrying. Cellular memory. In the cellular memory, for sure.
Hello, thanks for tuning into Power Perspectives, People, Passion, Purpose. I'm Shannon, a transformation coach, and today my incredible guest is a Kundalini and PAX Energy Practitioner, a K.A.P Facilitator, Reiki Master, and Soul Guidance Coach and Mentor. She helps people connect to, balance, and embody their divine masculine and feminine energies. An avid researcher, writer, and former journalist in London, as well as an active channel and past life guidance worker for her clients. I'm very grateful to have Galea as my guest today. Welcome to Power Perspectives, Claire. Thank you so much for joining me. I really, really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Absolutely. So one of the main reasons that, we were called to connect, I think, is because in the last couple of years, Kundalini and energy work and just alternative therapeutic modalities to taking pills have been more around. People are more awakening to this. And a lot of people don't know maybe what Kundalini is, but they know a lot about energy work. Could you just start off by sharing to us what is Kundalini and what it means to you?
Kundalini is, and it was actually an Indian guru that described it like this, is really just another name for the energy that is everything. Moves through everything, that moves through us, that's part of everything. So other words for it are Shakti, Prana, Chi, that we know probably everyone's familiar with Chi, and the Holy Spirit as well, actually. So that's essentially what it is. But what a person does with it or how they use it is different. And I think there's a lot of misconception, there's a bit of confusion about different sort of results or experiences that you can have whilst working with the energy.
And you've had a lot of experience with Kundalini, and I know there's Kundalini Activation, there's Kundalini Rising. Can you share a little bit more about what the differences are between awakening, arising, and sometimes people have these huge explosive experiences that render them kind of lost for a little while, myself included in that, but it sends you on a journey. Can you just describe a little bit about what the differences of experiencing Kundalini are?
Sure. I think I do get quite a lot of questions, and quite a lot of people come to me and they're really quite nervous.
Yeah.
And they'll say, I'm really nervous about this, it's my first time or something. Yeah. And they're worried because they've heard about the Kundalini awakening.
Yeah.
And that's the experience that puts most people off. Kundalini awakening is when a person does a little bit too much too quickly. And exactly what they will experience will depend on the individual. And so we can have instances of psychosis. I know of someone who had or described it as ME, and could barely, in her 20s, could barely get out of bed for 2 years. She said her mother had to shower her. I've heard of someone who had like a 10-year migraine as a result of having an awakening experience. What I do is nothing like that. We stay away from that completely. We don't encourage that. I think sometimes people can have those kind of experiences through plant medicine and breath work in particular. And I know, I won't go into that, but certainly breath work can bring on those kind of experiences. What I'm doing with the energy and when I'm healing someone, it's an activation. And the idea is that the way I used to describe it to my kids when they were young, it's like climbing a ladder. So what you really want to do ideally is raise your vibration a bit at a time and just as much as the body can take. So when I'm working with someone, I'm feeling into their energy field, they'll only receive a healing for as much as they can handle in that moment in time. And so they'll feel the benefits, they'll feel the difference. But they're not going to have that sort of, absolutely. They can. So, for example, if they've done a lot of work on themselves already, and if they've had experienced other healing modalities, then people can and do have this spontaneous Kundalini rising. But that, again, it's not the awakening. So the Kundalini rising is what I think most people are after. And that's when you have kind of like, it starts off with the base chakra, and people identify it as the rising of the two snakes, the divine masculine and feminine, which are the Ida and Pingala. And so you have this double helix experience coming from the base chakra, rising up and having this entire all-body orgasm. And if anyone's sort of done the Dr. Joe Dispenza work with the very intense breath work, that's certainly what their aim is during that experience. But again, whilst searching for the Holy Grail, if you're sort of reaching or at it a little bit too intensely, then the Kundalini Rising can bring about a Kundalini awakening, and that's not really what we want. That's not really what we're after.
That's so interesting, and I know, like, you and I have talked a lot before this, and it just, everything was just aligned. And I know, like, at Dr. Joe workshops, you've done the 7-day advanced retreat, and people are, he calls it popping off. You're doing this intense breath work. You're breathing up this cerebrospinal fluid through your energy centers and trying to convert benzodiazepine into dimethyltryptamine, and he says it with such science that it's very more understandable for everyone. And then when we talk about it in kind of like the healing, more esoteric or spiritual versions, it can put a lot of people at like, that's a bit woo-woo for me. What do you say to skeptics about, what, is she actually doing anything, or is she just, putting her hands over me, or what do you say to skeptics that don't quite understand your work?
Well, I love the science, and so I can back up or answer most questions, so I can answer most questions with a scientific explanation and quote research that's been done into this area. And I've always had a very inquisitive mind. I was a wide child. And so to start off with, when I began my journey about 16 years ago, most of my journey was about finding my answers to why I'm here, what does it all mean, what's my purpose, is there life after death, and all that kind of thing. And so I got all my answers at the very start. But of course, there's a lot more to a spiritual journey than just answers. But in terms of going back to the science, one thing I say to people is that Einstein was all over this. I mean, he's a god himself, isn't he? Well, definitely an ascended master. And so is Tesla. And so if you think about our very essence, at our very, very core, we're all just energy. And the reason why we have this different I was young when I discovered that this chair isn't really a chair, it's not really a solid, it's energy. I was really quite young. And I remember thinking, no way, but I can touch it, I can feel it, how can that be? And then I know it wasn't used for good at the end of the day, because then we had the discovery of the atom bomb. But when you split the atom to its very core essence, if you consider that power that comes out when you reach our core essence of who we are, that potential power, that amount of energy, it's the way that you release it though, really, obviously, but that amount of energy is at our very core. So Einstein was a new age hippie, if he were alive today. He's kind of all over this. And then there's so many experiments, and there's so much research and DNA and epigenetics, and it's proven. So
let's say someone is coming to you. What can they expect if they've never kind of been on this journey before?
If they've had no experience at all, then at the very, very least, at the very minimum, they will feel tingling in their crown chakra at the top of their head, and maybe sort of a numbness in their hands, or pins and needles in their hands and fingertips. They might feel little sort of spasms, muscle twitches or spasms in their arms. And they can go on their own journey, so they kind of like a dreamlike state where they have their own visions and colours and that kind of thing. And that's the kind of minimum I would hope that someone, or most people, experience during a K.A.P session. And then at the end of it, they feel incredibly grounded and peaceful. I had one lady sat up at the end of it. She's quite young, and she just went, "What was that?" again, it's so funny, but that's people are speechless at the end of it because you can't quite describe it. Yeah. We get that a lot. We get lots of tears as well, but happy tears or relief, or very cathartic tears.
But I felt that your hands were on me. I thought you were holding my head, and I know you had held it before, or just were around me. And then I realized I could hear you elsewhere, and you weren't there. And my head was just like, and it was such a tangible experience. But if we could talk just a little bit about, so that's Kundalini activation. But there's also, so some people see the big body movements, like the huge jerking, and even when I did a Dr. Joe workshop, I saw some people like having full-on spasms. Like you would think that it was a reaction or a what is it called?
Possession.
Something like that. You would think that it was like one man, the only thing that was touching the ground was his heels and the back of his head.
Yeah.
But that's not for everyone, and some people expect. I remember thinking like, oh, I'm not popping, I'm not having a body spasm. How come? And you can put this pressure on yourself to achieve it if you see other people doing that.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's like you don't have to necessarily have the big spasm to have the healing. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I had seen a video that my friend sent me of Venom from his website, venom1.com. You can go and have a look at this video of people rising.
Yeah, I saw that.
I saw that. If I hadn't done the Dr. Joe thing, because I remember when I was at the Dr. Joe thing, he got some of his helpers up on stage so that people could see what the Kundalini looked like moving through a person. Yeah. And I'll never forget, there was this enormous guy who was about 6'8".
His name's Otto. He's my good friend. He goes
to
this.
Really?
Yeah, he's like, I'm always the guy because I can get into it so quick. He's in Germany now.
Oh, really?
I hope that he'll watch this.
I just remember, because he's like a gentle giant. Yes. I just remember there was about, 4 of them maybe sitting on their chairs on stage, and he fell off his chair. He just went plonk. And he just went over sideways, like he was running around there. And I just went, I was mortified. Like, I grew up strict Irish Catholic. And I was mortified. I just went, there's no way I'm doing that. There's just no way. And I remember thinking, now I can see why in the Bible they thought people were possessed. It's probably Kundalini moving through people.
That makes sense.
So my friend invited me not long afterwards down to Sydney to experience this immersion weekend with Venom. And she sent me the promotional video, and I looked at it and I just went, I'm so doing that. Sign me up, I'm so in for it. But it does put a lot of people off because it does look like you're possessed. And so just a brief explanation about that. When you're lying there, because I then went there with no expectation. I didn't want to see anything else. I didn't want to read anything else because I was, in my mind it's like, oh, I'm not going to move. I'm going to be one of the, percentages that doesn't move. And so when you're lying there, I think the best advice that Bennett gave was really just scan your body and just be aware of what's going on, and any little movement, just observe with non-attachment, and that's it. And I was feeling it after about the third song, something. I was feeling it in my left hand, and I was thinking, oh, what's going on there? Maybe something's going to happen. But of course, you naturally go, I want something to happen. And what it feels like is a strong urge. So it looks like you're a puppet on the video, and it looks like someone's pulling your strings and moving you around. But it doesn't feel like that. It feels like it's a strong urge that you just want to follow. And if you allow yourself, so initially it's kind of, you might have a thought, does my hand want to move? And then you it's like you're almost doing it, and then something takes over. Because so many people say to me afterwards, I was moving, but it felt like I was doing it. And it kind of does. That you are in control, and you can stop at any time. But you just have this incredibly strong urge to move in a certain way, or get up or stretch. People do yoga poses and mudras. And while you're doing it, it just feels really good. The movement just feels so wonderful as you're doing it. Yeah, that's right. And then your mind might go elsewhere. And when it comes back, you think, oh, what was I just doing? Like, you're still moving. and you're doing all these movements, and the energy itself is expressing itself and doing the movements sort of for you. But people are worried about that. They so there's nothing to be worried about when you do that. I would say, people get disappointed if they don't move, but the majority, I think, don't. And Bennett did say himself that it was, he sort of expressed some of the difficulties of making a video like that and how you get the timing right. And once you've cleared the energy, then you kind of go over a hump and you come out the other side, and then you won't move as much anymore because you've kind of done a lot of it. He describes it as the friction of the high frequency coming in and rubbing up against lower frequencies that are trapped in our body, and that creates the movement. And so once you start to read yourself after, because it is a process, and so it's meant to be a regular process. It's meant to be, if you can, in a group. Not necessarily if it's a one-on-one, but if it's a group, it's like a meditation group, or you should ideally do it weekly to maintain your vibration and keep clearing. Because if we, I obviously do believe in past lives, because you're not going to get it right in one. There's too much. And so if you consider how much can be trapped inside, then it's something that we need to release gradually. But for sure, there's nothing to be afraid of. And also people can block the movement if they're either scared or want it too much. They can both block the movement. But also people have their own individual relationship with the energy. And they might not move at all. They might just go on a transcendental journey. But they'll get all their messages and communication from their guides and whatnot. So one thing I like to tell people, so I'm going on a bit, but it is passionate, because it's the one thing that that puts people off, I think. So it's really good to address it. When I was training, actually doing my facilitator training, there was another woman there who said that she'd been going for a year, every week, regularly, and hadn't moved for a year. She'd never moved. And I just went, oh my gosh, good on you for persevering. What made you persevere? And she said, I knew it was working. I felt different. I've just felt so much more peaceful and grounded. My relationship with my husband improved. And she said, I could see it just rippling out. No, you don't. But it does feel good if you do, but equally it works if you don't.
Amazing. And you mentioned past life regression there. I think that's phenomenal, because when I was with you having a session as well, you said some things that I, one, felt in Ayahuasca in several sessions, and two, I had two other psychics say something very similar, and it was just kind of, we had no talk about that whatsoever, and it was kind of not just a validation, but like you said, we cleared that now. And I'm like, what? Like you did something, reaffirmed it for me, validated it, and then cleared it. And that meant so much to me, and when you do see things, when you're doing like the PAX facilitation, can you just describe a little bit about, like, I know you said before, like, it doesn't work a certain way that people think it does. Like, what does your clairvoyance with seeing past lives and energy, how does that work?
Happy to answer that. Just one point before I do is that I would so love to take the credit for clearing something. But what happens is your body is obviously ready to release it. So some of your experiences before, or other healings before, brings your body to a point of being able to receive the energy and reach a tipping point. And it's in this session, yes, it is still a powerful session. It will have cleared in the session, and it does. I don't want to take away from how powerful it is, because it is a really powerful modality. But other things will have brought you to this point as well. Like I had one client came, and she had a hang-up, she said, from school. Her maths teacher had made her feel dumb in class, had humiliated her. And she was a nurse, and she actually gave up the nursing profession because you have to calculate dosages according to the person's body weight. And she would freeze. And she said that she came and she saw me once, and she said it cleared, and 48 hours later I checked up on her, so how are you going? She said, yeah, it's definitely gone, thank you. So it can happen, but sometimes it's someone getting to a tipping point, and then they can clear like a lifetime of humiliation or blockage, and it can just go in a session. But what I actually do, it kind of grew. What I'm actually doing, the sort of the psychic revelations that come in a session and the messages, I wasn't aware of to begin with. And actually, growing up, I've always been fascinated by energy work and that kind of thing. And all the books I read when I was a kid were all witchy books. I loved it.
It's in your DNA.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I would go and see a psychic, and quite often was told, you can do this. You can. And I was like, no, I can't. I don't know what they're talking about, but they were very positive and sort of saying, you're very connected. You can do this. And so initially, it took me a while to realise what was happening, and I remember thinking, why am I seeing flowers when I'm healing someone? I keep seeing flowers, and so then I started Googling the spiritual meaning of a yellow rose or a daisy or
Venus flytrap.
That was right. A Venus flytrap. And then I would take that message or that symbolism and relate it or integrate it to the rest of the healing and also the chakra that it would come up in, and listen to the message, and then I started thinking, why am I? Because then I started seeing animals, and I was thinking, why am I seeing flowers and animals? And I think because there's no ego in nature, and also my ego can't get in the way in terms of the message or the interpretation is there.
Yeah, and then you just kind of
Google
what that means.
It's a pure meaning, it's a pure message.
That's awesome.
And then I started seeing energy. I could see vortexes and colours and particles, and then the energy kind of takes a shape for me. That's why I don't learn what the flowers and the animals mean, because I don't want to have that projection.
Yeah, that's cool.
Because sometimes an image can evolve, and while it's evolving, I don't want to say, oh, that's a yellow rose, or I don't want to.
So if you give it a definition, then you limit it before it's okay.
Exactly,
cool.
exactly. So I just allow the image to come up, and then research it afterwards. And then past lives started coming up, so I would start seeing maybe a little girl and she's playing in a meadow or something like that.
Was it weird the first couple of times? We're like, what? Who is this? Why are you here?
Initially I thought it was the person's childhood or an experience in this lifetime.
And then maybe you saw them as a different gender or...
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. And then the story would unfold. And at first I thought I was daydreaming.
Yeah.
And then I went to see it was actually my Pellowah teacher, and I had a reading with her. And she said, you're very connected. This is a few years ago. And she said, your guides are saying, are asking me, who do you think you're talking to in your head when you have the thoughts? Do you think they're just your thoughts? And I kind of went, And she said, they're not your thoughts, you're connected and you're being spoken to all the time. And that kind of encouraged me to really listen.
Because you're in such an interesting line of work, and this is such an interesting modality, is there anything that you wish more people knew about what you were doing? With the Kundalini, with PAX, and you can explain PAX actually would be great. Some questions there for you.
I think, I was going to say there's so much I want people to know. Predominantly, I'll give you the short form answer. Predominantly the difference between the modalities, why they have different names and that kind of thing and how they work. And then the other thing is what their contribution could and should be, what a healing can do for you.
That would be amazing. Yes, what
you.
Healing is supposed to be and what it's not, and people think that it is.
So the first one is, because I sort of was wondering, and it took me a long time, because I had a few messages coming through from different people, and something that I received from myself during a healing, that I would channel my own modality. And of course the first message that came through straight away, a few years ago, went, no. Straight away, it's like,
I don't think I will.
That's your ego talking. But then it was two, I think, other people said the same. So then I started thinking, but I don't want to call it anything. I don't want to name it and I don't want to market it. Because how can you put, then I started thinking that it's all source energy at the end of the day, regardless of who's, because I'm a Reiki master as well. And so I was thinking, why do they call it Reiki? And why do they call it theta healing? And why do they call it, what's the difference? And so then it is all source energy. But the energy can only do, because of course we're all working on our vibrations all the time. And getting back to the sort of the idea of, I don't know if we've discussed that there, in Kundalini Awakening, it's too much too soon, too high a frequency too soon. So getting back to that idea, everyone can only channel a little bit more than their own vibration.
Yes. Okay.
There's a sort of capacity that you can deliver. And so each energy will feel different according to the channeler, even though you're supposed to be a pure channel. And as you're supposed to just be channeling source energy, it depends on your
filter,
own.
right?
That's correct. And so you should go to a person that resonates with you, and the healing will only do as much as your body can take anyway. So, for example, the difference between K.A.P and PAX is that K.A.P is a more masculine energy, and it's a sort of general energy. So it's on your entire field, all of your chakras, but it's really about releasing. So you'll experience a shift and you'll really feel like you've got rid of a lot of stuff. That's why some people sort of say they experience a myriad of emotions through the hour session that they're lying there for, but they don't know what it was about. It can be, past life stuff, and they feel happy and then sad and joy and grief and, all sorts of different things. With PAX, it's more focused. It's a more divine feminine energy. People describe it like having a warm, nurturing hug from ancient grandmother wisdom.
Felt that.
It is
being held.
Really huggy. It's really supporting. It's pure. It's love. It's it's a transmission. It's wanting the very best for you, and it's really working out what is it at this moment in time. What do you need to be looking at? Which chakras in particular, one or two? It works on all of your field, but one or two in particular that's holding you back. So the messages, more messages come through with PAX. They're very specific, they're very supportive, and it's really about the next step of your journey and how to get there. So they're the sort of Reiki I did afterwards. Like some people were saying, why did you do Reiki afterwards? Because they perceive K.A.P or PAX as being stronger. They might feel it, whereas they might not have felt Reiki. And I think it was kind of out of curiosity. And I was pleasantly surprised. It was stronger than I thought it was going to be. And it was very grounding. So I feel like it's a very, very grounding sort of first step for a lot of people to step into this area if they're a bit nervous. But I was pleasantly surprised. It has had a better reception overseas. For some reason, it's I don't know, the perception of it over here isn't. I don't think people understand what it is or what it can do. It's just not. I think there'll be a tipping point. Hopefully, get the message out there and people will understand a little bit more about what it is. But I only really discovered the difference when I received a healing from Nadine, who's German but lives in Mexico. And she's a fellow K.A.P facilitator, and asked me to be her demo recently in Brisbane. And she said, "What's going on with K.A.P? It's just not. Where is it in Australia?"
And that's why I think it's great to bring this to anybody that has that. Like when I first had my experience, I didn't know what it was, and I was just like, "What the hell happened to me? And how do I reconcile normal life now?" It felt like where I was experiencing it, it looked as if I was having a seizure, and I was far, far away in Ayahuasca, and I know it sometimes comes through with certain psychedelics, and I wished I would have been able to know about you sooner and find you sooner, but it wasn't meant to be. It's here and now, which is wonderful. But what would you say to someone that is just kind of searching for either like an energy release or alignment there, or just to find out more about how to gradually, processfully driven find Kundalini alignment, I suppose?
I think if they want the physical experience in particular, then it really is about surrender and trust.
Surrender, big one.
Yeah. So really, if someone wants the movement experience, it's not to be afraid, because it actually feels really good.
Yeah.
And surrender, and don't be disappointed if it doesn't happen. Yeah, and as I said, it's that very cathartic feeling afterwards, you just go, because it literally is that actually. And this is what a psychologist told me, that if a deer is in flight, for example, first thing is they pee themselves. Now, luckily never did that.
Oh, that's good. I didn't do that.
And it's to prepare themselves to run, and then they run, and then afterwards, when they're in safety again, hopefully, they do the shudder like dogs coming out of water.
Yeah.
That's what we don't do. And so all of our childhood traumas, our shocks, even if you go up behind someone and go boo, there's that instant, freezing, and that stays there, that stays in the body, because you don't get human beings going and shaking it all off. And so the Kundalini is the shaking of it off.
Okay,
that's when you get the opportunity to go and shake it out of the body.
Can you share a little bit about what happens in the brain that we were talking about before?
Yes, that's right, because I didn't answer the second part of your question, was it, in what the healing can do and what the healing can't do for you. So I'll answer that question first and then relate it to that, your question about the brain. What it is, and this is Dr. Joe, I like his work because he was a chiropractor and he healed himself after a cycling accident, and so he does explain what's going on scientifically. And you can look it up on YouTube, where you can, breaking a habit, you can see the two neurons. And it's like those machines that you put your hands on and your hair stands on end, and the way they look, those kind of little lightning streaks. The neurological connection looks like that between the two neurons. And when you're breaking a habit, it literally looks like a root of a plant that shrivels up and dies and breaks. But in order to reform a new and healthier or more positive habit, that can take time. And you see the little sort of electrical bolts kind of trying to find each other, and then they connect, and then they break off a little bit, and then they connect and reconnect. And that's why you've got to sort of keep on going until you solidify that connection and strengthen it and form a new habit. So moving on to what can a healing do and what can a healing not do, is during the healing, and actually epigenetics comes into it as well, but during a healing, what you're doing is you're releasing the past lives, and it's not necessarily your experience of that past life, because no one is to blame for their past lives, and I really emphasize this for my clients. So if it's a bad past life, they go, oh no, and they kind of want to reject that. But that's our soul's decision, and that's the soul's, blame the soul.
Relief when you said that the first time. I was like, oh, okay, great. That's not my karmic lesson to keep carrying and hurt myself about,
Like, I have a slightly different interpretation of karma, and this is my interpretation of karma. So, and I didn't mean that arrogantly, but this is logic to me. And so I exonerate my clients by saying, don't worry, it wasn't you. It's like a candle, and you have a flame and you blow out the flame, and the candle is the soul, but the flame is a different past life. It's a completely different flame. So your past lives you don't have the responsibility for, but their emotional trauma is what you're carrying.
Cellular memory.
In the cellular memory, for sure. And so what this healing is doing is clearing all that out. Clearing out our ancestral patterning, clearing out childhood traumas, all of this heavy silt that's weighing us down, really like convict shoes. And so it gives you a kickstart, it really gives you a boost, and you'll feel the shift, you'll feel the difference in you. And if it's a one-on-one, you'll feel it for 2 weeks afterwards. If it's a group, you'll feel it for 2 days or more. But you just feel so grounded and connected and peaceful. And your kids don't trigger you as much, your normal triggers, kind of, you just go whatever. But that will wear off. And so that's when that feeling plateaus, that's when you have to start doing the work. And so we're coming back to the neurological connections. So the energy healing can help break the old connection and clear you of these habits and, maybe past life guilt, trauma. It can help really clear you out and give you a shift. But unless you form those new, healthier ways of being or habits through being in the present moment, like Buddha preached, conscious self-awareness, so that you can catch yourself and prevent those bad habits coming back. Because otherwise, you'll just create the same in your body again. That's right. And that's why you get what I call sort of modality hoppers, where they come for a healing, they feel great, because you can actually get a high from it. You can really feel floaty and grounded at the same time, which is lovely. You feel, some people feel really blissful. And then when that wears off, they come for more healings, and then there's a law of diminishing returns. And then after a while, when it isn't it's like if you were to eat the same food. I did it once actually, adzuki beans. I read this thing about adzuki beans being so good for your heart. So for 10 days in a row, I was eating this adzuki beans stew that I'd made. By the 10th day, I was almost, sorry on your video, I was gagging.
Wait for me, zuki beans.
It was like, no, I can't do this. I managed to get it down though. And I was thinking those poor, when Moses took the people through the desert and they ate the same thing for 40 years. And I just, I'm a real foodie, sorry, I wouldn't like to be here. But anyway, so there's a law of diminishing returns, and then they try another modality and they get that high again, and then, so at some point you have to do the work, and Dr. Joe's really big on that. He's always going, did you do the work? Are you doing the work? And by that he means the daily breathwork practice. By that I actually mean the sort of really heartfelt spiritual path of wanting to get closer on a daily basis with the divine, have that heartfelt communion with the divine and the frequency of the divine.
Is that meditation so if someone's saying, okay, if the work's not going to the healing or the therapy, what is the work? Is it practicing what I've being more forgiving? Is it meditating? Is it all of it? What is doing?
There are many different aspects to doing the work. Actually, I'm my past career was journalism and writing, which is still it's my passion. Reading books and
I can tell there's books everywhere in this house. I'm jealous. I'm extremely jealous.
It's my absolute passion, and because I wish that someone had given me those signposts, and perhaps I know that it was meant to be and everything else, and unfolds at when it's supposed to be. But 16 years is quite a long time, and so if I can help people get there quicker than I did, then I'm all for that. And writing a book about signposts to spirituality, what does it all mean, and making sense of it, and what can I be doing? And I think really the distinction I'd like to make is the difference between trauma healing, inner child healing, and shadow work.
Right.
Shadow work isn't trauma healing, and it's not inner child wounding either. The shadow work is the self-awareness journey, and that really is the most important journey, I feel, towards self-love. And of course that's the journey towards the divine, because the divine is pure love, it's the highest frequency. And so it's about self-acceptance, but you can't accept yourself unless you're prepared to see the sort of aspects of ourselves that we hide. It's a Freudian concept, it's a defense mechanism.
It's not what you're posting on Facebook.
That's right, it's what the ego hides from us to protect our self-confidence, basically. Because we're all fragile beings. It doesn't matter how confident someone comes across. Often that's, they're just the other side.
Overcompensating.
Yeah, that's right. It's the other end of the spectrum. So you've got someone who's really shy or really loud and gregarious and outgoing. They're both shy to me. They're both, it's the same. And so if we're that fragile and insecure, and I think human beings are very fragile, and we're also ingrained with this survival fear, so we put up our walls and our boundaries. So we're not likely to do something that's going to make those walls crumble, and we're going to feel crap about ourselves for a while. And that's the difficulty of shadow work. But until it's done, until we sort of increase this self-awareness, you can't get to self-acceptance if you're not accepting all of you.
That makes sense.
And you can't get to self-love until you manage to achieve self-acceptance.
I was going to ask, and I know there is so many books here, do you have a favorite book or quote that has either changed your life or something you keep coming back to that's moved you? And I know we talked so much about books.
Yeah. There's so many. It's really hard to choose one. But at the moment, the one that I bought lots of copies that I can lend to people is Conversations with God. It has to be, doesn't it?
My favourite.
It kind of like, I did have that feeling when I was reading Dr. Joe. It was like, I thought that, oh my God, I thought that, and it connects all the dots for you. You get really uplifted thinking, I had those ideas as well. It's nice to see them in print.
Yeah.
And then it was similar with Conversations with God. It was like, it resonated so deeply, and I thought, this is just pure truth. And it made me feel even closer, and I think there's definitely a transmission of energy in the book when you're reading it, because you kind of want to read it because you feel uplifted, and you do get that. I feel like I've had a healing, whilst reading the book, and then I thought there's a transmission in this book for sure.
I think that you say that, like, if you're reading this, you called yourself to it, and I think the third book is the one for me that just encapsulates the first two. It's a trilogy, and I've never had a book that I've read so much and keep as a manual. But you have so many nuggets of wisdom with you as well, and you've read all these books, and it's apparent in your demeanor. You take the information and you share it. Like, what do you want to share with people about what you've learned and how to just have more fulfilling life?
I think more than anything, I would love to help people take a shortcut.
Good.
Because I've been doing this for 16 years, and some of it's been really, really painful.
Yeah.
And if I could take that out of it for people, or to show them a shortcut, or it doesn't have to take that long.
Yeah.
And so, what I really want to do is make sure that they realise that there's hope. That it doesn't have to take as long as it took me.
A dark night of the soul, not a dark 16 years.
Absolutely. Yeah. And also, I think what really, really pains me is, because I have been there, I know what emotional pain feels like.
Yeah.
And I really want to help people out of that as quickly as possible. And so my heart really goes out to people who, because I know, as I said, I know what it feels like, who feel that they're stuck. I don't want anyone to feel like they're stuck. And so I think one of the messages, or the sort of quotes that I really like around that support that, is don't look at the mountaintop, look at your feet, and let your journey unfold one step at a time. And I think sometimes when you're in that place, the overwhelm can be so great that if you compare where you are to where you want to be, that gap can seem enormous.
You don't do anything, or you could go backwards even.
Yeah, that's right, because it does. It then makes it seem impossible, and that's where people can give up.
Makes sense.
And I don't want anyone to sort of give up. It's suffocating.
Yeah, it's heavy.
It is really, really heavy and really suffocating, and you do feel like you're wearing concrete shoes. And I don't want, my heart goes out to people who feel that they're in that situation, and I just want to, if there's anything I can do to make it easier or to support someone, then that's what I want to do.
And you're facilitating healings across the world. So you're Zoom, you're doing stuff Zoom with people in California, Sydney, Spain, Europe, me when we moved shortly. So it doesn't affect the healing to be over long distance.
No, that's right, and quite a lot of people can't get their heads around that, because at the end of the day we're working with a quantum field, and if we are all only energy, when you take us down to our smallest denominator, energy can go anywhere.
Quantum entanglement.
Yeah, that's right. And so I had a really lovely compliment the other day. I was working on someone in Spain, and she had experienced K.A.P in person in Spain, and she said it was stronger by Zoom, and she sort of was blown away. She said, I knew it would work by Zoom because, of course, she's actually a healer herself.
Cool.
She said, but I didn't think it would be that strong, and it was stronger than she'd experienced in person. So I was really delighted.
That's amazing. Well, that's the goal, and I'll put some links up for people to find Claire. And just so grateful for your time. I'm so happy that you had time to meet with me.
Thank you so much for asking me. It's been really lovely. I really enjoyed chatting to you.
Wait, now you're stuck being my friend.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Power Perspectives, People, Passion, Purpose. My guest today was Claire Galea, and you can find her at claire@theethericssoul.com.au or find her on Facebook or Instagram with the same name. Until next time, thanks for tuning in and have an amazing day.